fund balance to keep the town portion of the taxes, I think it was lower than it was last year, that concerns me. That tells me we have $350,000 worth of spending that had we not been able to dip into the piggy bank, our tax rate would have been up incrementally by whatever that would impact the rate on. So, although it's a good thing to be able to fall back on it, I think it's gotten to the point where we rely on it as a cushion to not worry about spending as much as we possibly could. Where's Chris? I don't know if that helps.
Yes, Jack.
Undesignated fund balance. I've got to put my 2 cents in, I guess, because this is money that's not in a bank account someplace as a separate fund. It's part of our everyday operating funds that we use. As an example, we have about, a couple of years ago, we had about $1.2 million in the undesignated fund balance. The county's tax bill, if you know, is due on December 17th of each year. So we got a tax bill from the county of $1.2 million of taxes due on December 17th. As your treasurer, I'm looking at our bank balance, and we had $850,000 in the bank account. That's part of the undesignated fund balance, because the tax bills hadn't gone out yet, and we hadn't gotten our tax money in yet. So fortunately, we got about, $850,000 in tax revenue the first week of December. So I had about $1.6 million in the bank when we had to write out a check for $1.2 million to the county. Now, it's not a separate fund that's just sitting there by itself. It is a cushion, and the state recommends, depending on who you talk to, anywhere from 5% to 70% of your operating budget. And not the town's operating budget, that's your entire operating budget. So between the town, the county, and the school, we have about an $11 million operating budget. So we should have, at 10%, $1.1 million in our undesignated fund balance as probably a minimum for the size operation that we are. The bigger you are, if you have a $30 million operation, you probably don't need $3 million. Maybe it could be $1.5 million or $2 million. So the bigger you are, the smaller your percentage has to be. But the undesignated fund balance just isn't something extra. It was money that was left over a course of period of time that accumulated, and again, the state recommends certain percentages that you have in the bank. But for me as treasurer, I look at it as my everyday operating cash flow. Now, if somebody looks at these statements that come out in the town report this year, they're gonna say we have a lot more money than we need. In our money market account at the end of the year, we had over $4 million in there from all the taxes we collected at the end of the year. Part of that is $460,000 that people paid in advance taxes because of the new tax law that was just passed. So we have $460,000 or $465,000 of extra money in the bank right now that we're not going to collect next year. So undesignated fund balance is it's a little hard to understand, but it's part of our everyday operating cash flow. I just wanted to try to explain that if I could.
Thank you, Jack. Do we have any other questions?
I have a question.
Max?
Could you ask Bob to explain a little bit more what he said in his opening remarks about how if we pass a warrant article this year, it'll affect operating budgets in the future?
Yep. So just as an example, this year, late in the game, a couple of years ago, we, as a legislative body, approved purchase or lease of a new rescue vehicle and a new ambulance. And the total expense for those, I think, is over $100,000 between the two. So this year, we're gonna see warrant articles to approve the expenditure for the lease payments for those vehicles, even though I, as well as everybody else, I think, thought, gee, we approved that 2 years ago, now we have a 5-year expense for the next 5 years to pay for those 2 vehicles. So I believe DRA popped up and said, oh, you know what? You have to get those expenditures approved because there's an escape clause. You have to get the payments on those vehicles approved by a legislative body every year until the lease is up. So, and to no fault of the budget committee or anybody else, because of the accounting requirements, those lease payments had to come out of the operating budget. So when I said some of the warrant articles that we may approve at town meeting are gonna drive that operating budget higher, that's a perfect example. So this year, as long as the town meeting approves the continued payments for those pieces of equipment, they're gonna be, they're gonna end up part of the operating budget. Maybe not technically in writing this year, but it's money we have to shell out, and and all the other budget warrant articles that we're gonna approve, if they have lease payments or loan payments on them, they get plugged into that operating budget, as I understand it.
Yes, Tom?
Isn't that the difference though between a lease and the outright purchase of the vehicle? That you would have had to have made when you bought those vehicles if you paid cash for them versus going on to a lease payment?
Well, the difference is if we paid for them outright, which, by the way, I circulated a warrant article to build capital reserves so we could do some of that. But you're right, if we paid for that outright, it wouldn't be in the operating budget. Just would have been a cash payment.
But when you paid for it for that year and put that into the budget, that would have increased the budget amount substantially.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue that all that stuff, if you outright purchase it, that year we spent that much. So my point was that the 3.7 really isn't what we're spending. If it's not just the 3.7 in the operating budget. So we could have lots of things like, I don't know, we've got air packs and all that stuff. And there's a whole host of warrant articles that we're gonna look at to approve. And all my point was that, Max, is that it's not just the 3.7 that's in the operating budget. There's far more money that we're spending.
Yes, sir.
Do we know if we approve all the warrant articles, what the total budget would be? Anybody have that figure?
I haven't calculated it, but, and it would depend, and Lloyd probably knows more about it because he's in the driver's seat, but I'm guessing it would depend on whether some were by lease, some were by purchase, and that kind of thing. But there's a lot of things in there that probably one-time hits. So if you just took the warrant articles and looked at how they're gonna fund it, some might say raise from taxes, some might say from the undesignated fund balance. And I think the new fire truck that's being proposed is gonna be a lease payment. So the way it's going, that might not even show up in the operating budget.
Correct.
That didn't help, did it?
Well, it's not a number.
Well,
I don't expect it exactly, but I mean, you're talking over 400, is that? 400?
Oh, my point, I easily think that if we approve all the warrant articles, that 3.7 number with what we approve for, spending and purchases and leases and all that kind of stuff could be easily another $500,000.
Matt?
There are at least 10 warrant articles that have to do with spending money, 19 warrant articles total. And the new fire engine would be around 130. The payment on a new library would be,
130, I think that's after 2019.
oh, okay, so that's future spending. But, so at least 12 warrant articles, you can think at least at least $4 million total, in my opinion.
Needless to say, it's an elusive number. Yes, Mario?
I have not been here for 10 years, but if either of you know, what was the budget 10 years ago in Putnam Borough, the local budget?
I don't have the exact number. Guy Pike might have it, but, well, Lloyd might even have it. But I'm guessing it's in the 800 to $1 million it's increased in the last 10 years, 800,000 to $1 million.
That is
It's-
increased?
It's increased. Just in the, and thanks to Helen for the charts, but just in the last 5 years, the number being flashed for the operating budget, and this is right off the chart, in 2014, it was shown as $3,175,000. This year, the proposed budget is $3,742,000. So there's a $566,000 increase in that number. And I will take direct responsibility for a big chunk of that, being part of that is the fire station. So,
Yes, ma'am.
I've only lived here for 18 years in Melvin Village. And I think tonight I'm supposed to hear why I should vote for one of you or the other. And I'm hearing a lot of numbers being thrown out that I don't necessarily understand. Percentages I might, and thank you, Jack, the percentage helped. I guess what I'd like to know, and my question is, with all you're talking about the budget, and Mr. Ledoux has certain, I mean, he clearly is right on top of this. I guess I would like to know, if I vote for you, sir, or if I vote for you, sir, what's it going to do to the budget of the town of Tufton Borough that has a lot of needs, and a lot of us don't have the money to just throw it in? So why should I vote for you, and why should I vote for you? And I'd like to hear each one of you give me an answer that I can understand, because all these numbers, I know they're going to be thrown out at town meeting, and I do the best I can, but I am not an accountant. So I want to know what you will do for me and my little house in Melvin Village.
Okay, you guys got it? Bob,
Yep.
you wanna go?
sure. So I guarantee you that decisions that I make will be based on what we need versus what we may want, okay? And the way to get at some of those decisions, and they're hard decisions, is to get the master plan updated and look at all the data, look at the spending, and come up with ideas how we can maintain the quality of life without our taxes escalating. And somebody's gonna put their hand up and say we have one of the lowest tax rates in the state, and that's great. But when Darlene and I figure out a way to save money, or some money comes at us that we didn't quite plan on coming at us, we don't try to figure out how to spend more money. And I think that's probably what has been going on, is that we have this illusion that we have a low tax rate. What's the big deal? It's still one of the lowest tax rates in the state. So when I've talked to people, when I continue to talk to people, and I appreciate you asking the question, and I hope you'll call me up, or I hope you'll vote for me. And if you vote for me and you don't understand what I'm doing or what I'm trying to do, that you'll be knocking on my door, asking me to explain it. And that's what I wish. I wish more people would be calling up or asking about this process. Because what I'm finding out is a lot of people, they don't understand that we now have our own ambulance, or that the history of our spending and how many policemen we have, that we don't have a policeman on duty 24 hours a day. So there's a lot of things that people should be more responsible about understanding, unless you ask, you're not gonna know. But I guarantee you, I honest to God guarantee you, that decisions I make are first gonna be based on well-established needs. And that's why I mentioned the police facility. Have you been down to the police department?
You betcha.
You've been inside that office?
Yes?
It's embarrassing. And it's been for 10 years that I've been here, full-time. It's embarrassing that we're still have to talk about what we're gonna do for the police facility. And those folks are the first line of defense, along with the fire folks. We took care of that. So I think more people need to ask the question. I don't know if that's a good answer for you, or if I can give you any more or not. But I'm passionate about it.
Thank you. I might call you.
603-930-3416.
Thank you.
It'll be in the paper this week. So.
Good.
Thank you, Bob. Lloyd?
It's great to have questions. Well, there's a lot of passionate people. I'm telling you, I spend the dollar like it's my dollar, and I'm pretty damn tight with the dollar. Perfect example is, we have to balance things. Worked with Chip and Bill this last year. We have responsibilities and contracts with our employees. We saved you. Somehow, $50,000 got saved. That should bring a smile to your face. It's not 100,000, it's not $1 million, but it's a beginning, isn't it? And you have my pledge.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions?
I'm sorry, just one more clarification.
Max, what
The
do you-
master plan has been mentioned. Some people might not know what the master plan is. What is the master plan? Bob?
That's a fair question.
So, what I know about the master plan is it's supposed to be, see it, what we have today, maybe a little bit of where we've been, what we have for facilities, hopefully look at demographics. And the last attempt, I guess, was a survey out to people about all the different things that Tufton Borough has to offer for services, quality of life, all that, with Mexico, all that kind of stuff. And an evaluation of what we may need to plan for in the future based on what we either have today or our population, how many kids we have, how many age brackets, that kind of stuff. And it really should be a guide to how we make decisions. And actually, CIP, the Capital Improvements Committee, is part of their charter is to map what's being proposed for future spending to the master plan. And we haven't had an updated master plan for, I don't know, where's Bill? How long has it been?
12 years.
2006
So we,
is the current master plan.
we're working off of a master plan that's 11 years old. So maybe somebody else that's been working on the master plan could explain it better than that. But that's, to me, it's almost either we're going to use a master plan or we're not. So why bother saying that we're going to make capital improvement decisions based on the master plan and rely on a document that's 11 years old? So, to me, it's either use it or don't use it. If somebody can explain to me that every capital improvement or every warrant article that has capital money associated with it, if you can take that and map it directly to a need in the master plan, I'm in. So, I don't know if that helps, Max.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. Lloyd, do you want to?
have the last word?
There's not much I can add. It's a planning document. It's a reference document. I've read all the chapters that are so far. It's substantially moving along. A lot of dedicated people are working on it, have worked on it. There's a number of chapters that are already completed.
So it's, sorry, it's currently being updated?
Yes.
Just, Bill, do you want to speak to that? No.
The update is ongoing. The draft of the update, complete draft, should be done around June of this year.
Did you hear that, Max? About June
June of this year,
of the current year, yes.
the draft. Okay, thank you.
I believe there's a process that you go through.
With the draft, there are public meetings that collect additional input before it is finalized.
Can you hear that back in the back?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Are there any other questions?
Thank you.
There being none, that would conclude this evening's program. Please encourage your friends and family as well as your neighbors to vote on Tuesday, March 13, and to come to town meeting on Wednesday, March 14. Just as a reminder for my friends in the library, there's a program on this Saturday at 10 o'clock on a presentation covering the proposed addition for the library. And with that, thank you for coming and have a good evening.